Okay, so if you're joining us today, chances are you're part of a very specific community, a deeply committed one.
Yeah.
Maybe right now also a pretty fatigued one.
Uh-huh.
We're talking about that sense of weariness,
Uh,
especially after such a huge buildup to a prophetic moment, like the Feast of Trumpets just passed, September 23rd, 24th, 2025.
it really is that feeling, isn't it? Like you've been holding your breath, the date passes, and then silence. Or worse, the noise starts from the scoffers.
Exactly.
And we saw that reflected so clearly in the materials you sent over, especially that 40days.txt file. It really captures that raw emotion, the anxiety, the doubt, people wondering, did we miss it? Were the dates wrong?
Right, and that feeling, that discouragement, that's precisely what we need to dig into today. Because this situation, this delay, it might not be an error at all.
No, not an error. It could actually be a feature, like the parable Jesus told in Matthew 25 about the bridegroom.
The one who famously delays his
Yes,
arrival, yes.
exactly. And that delay, it has a purpose, doesn't it? It's designed maybe to separate the ones who are truly prepared, who have their oil, from those who aren't.
A kind of purification process built into the waiting.
Precisely. But here's the thing. If it's a designed process, and we're talking about a God who seems to use patterns and numbers with incredible precision, well, that delay can't just be infinite, right? There has to be some kind of scriptural boundary, a maximum waiting period, maybe. So the big question for this deep dive is, if there is a test of perseverance built in, what's the longest God might let that test run before, the deliverance comes?
Okay, let's unpack that.
Yeah.
Because the sources we're looking at, they keep pointing towards one specific number, a number that seems to act like a coded limit for this whole waiting game. It threads through so many key moments in scripture testing, transformation, you name it, and that number is 40. Yeah. So we're diving deep today into why 40 days, counted from the Feast of Trumpets, which interestingly lands us right around November 1st or 2nd on our calendar, why that might represent the absolute divinely set limit for this waiting time.
And to really crack that, we need to start with the calendar itself. Look for clues that aren't obvious. If the timing is meant to catch people off guard.
It won't be on the big, well-known feast days everyone expects.
Exactly. It'll be somewhere else, somewhere a little more hidden.
So where do the sources suggest we start looking for this next potential date after trumpets?
Well, the biggest instruction comes straight from Jesus, as in the days of Noah.
Okay.
That flood narrative, it's presented as the blueprint, not just for the judgment, but for the waiting time and the eventual escape. Now, most people remember the flood, obviously, but not many recall the specific date given in Genesis 7.
There's a specific date.
Oh, yes. Genesis 7 says the flood began on the 17th day of the second month. That date is incredibly precise.
Huh? The 17th day of the second month. You don't hear that one talked about much, unlike Passover or trumpets.
You really don't. It falls outside the main festival cycle, so it gets kind of overlooked in prophetic circles, but it's key.
Okay, so how do we map that onto the calendar we're watching now? We just passed the Feast of Trumpets, which kicks off the civil new year. So that month, Tishri, is month 1.
Correct. Tishri is month 1. The very next month, month 2, is Keshvan. But here's where a little linguistic detail becomes, really significant.
Okay.
The traditional proper name for this month isn't just Keshvan, it's Mar Keshvan.
Mar Keshvan. Okay, what does the Mar add? What does it mean?
Mar means bitter.
Bitter.
Yes, and it's not just descriptive. The sources suggest it's prophetic. Rabbis have historically called this the bitter month, or sometimes the inconsequential month, even the dry month.
Why inconsequential?
Because out of all 12 months, Mar Keshvan has almost no major appointed times. No big feasts, no major fasts, no widely celebrated observances. Historically, the only major event associated with it was
The flood.
the flood. Exactly.
So the month itself carries this feeling of emptiness, bitterness, a lack of celebration.
Precisely. That feeling that many watchmen might be experiencing right now, nothing's happening, or we waited through Tishri, now what?
Yeah.
That feeling is kind of baked into the name and history of this very month.
Wow.
And that bitterness, that lack of obvious appointed times, it lines up perfectly with what Jesus warned, right? That the event happens precisely when people don't expect it.
Like the scoffing Noah faced before the flood.
Exactly like that. It mirrors that perfectly. So the sources argue that the bitterness you or others watching might be feeling, it's actually confirmation you're in the right season, the predicted bitter month.
That's actually quite a perspective shift. It reframes the negative feeling into potential confirmation. Okay, let's get back to the numbers, the timing. Because earlier theories about the delay didn't pan out.
Right.
People looked at, what, a 7-day delay maybe, pointing to Yom Kippur, or 21 days to Shemini Atzeret.
Those are common ideas.
Why did those calculations seem to fall short, according to this analysis? And how does the Noah timeline give us a different number?
Well, those theories, they mostly failed because they were just looking for the next feast day on the calendar. They assumed the delay had to end at another known appointment. But Noah's timeline, if it's the blueprint, suggests a much longer waiting pattern. We have to start the count right from the beginning of Tishri, the Feast of Trumpets.
All right, day 1 of the civil year. Let's walk through the math slowly so we get this right.
Okay, so Tishri, month 1, has roughly 30 days. Right.
Roughly, yeah. Depends on the lunar sighting, but around 30.
Okay. Now, the flood, the big judgment event in Genesis, starts on the 17th day of the second month, Keshvan.
Got it.
So you take the 30 days of Tishri, add the 17 days into Keshvan, and you get 47 days total.
47 days. Wait, okay. So 47 days from trumpets lands us around, what, November 8th or 9th on our calendar?
Approximately, yes.
But that's the date the judgment began, the day the flood started. Our focus here, the hope, is about the escape date, right? The rapture, the entry into the ark before the judgment.
Precisely. That's the crucial distinction. Day 47 is when the judgment hits. But Genesis 7 is very clear. Before the rain started, Noah and his family went into the ark, and then it says God shut the door.
Okay.
And they were inside the ark, waiting for 7 days before the fountains of deep broke open and the rains began.
So there's a 7-day period inside the safety of the ark before the world outside faces judgment. That's the missing piece.
That is the key, yes. If the judgment, the flood, starts on day 47, then the entry into the ark, the deliverance, the escape must have happened 7 days before that.
Okay, so 47 minus 7, that equals 40.
Exactly 40. That places the entry point, the moment of being shut in safely, precisely on the 40th day after the Feast of Trumpets.
Which lines up perfectly with that November 1st or 2nd time frame we mentioned earlier.
It does. So this 40-day waiting period isn't just random thumb twiddling. It's presented as the final countdown. The period of testing the oil, like the virgins, right before the door is shut and the escape is secured.
So the delay itself is encoded, not just a vague wait, but potentially a specific 40-day period patterned after Noah's timeline.
That's the argument.
Okay, this flows perfectly into the next big question, though.
Yeah.
Why 40? What is it about this specific number? Why does it show up again and again for periods of testing, purification, and ultimately deliverance?
Well, the sources suggest the primary reason, the most visceral, fundamental one, is actually biological.
Biologic.
40 weeks. It's the typical length of a full-term human pregnancy, 40 weeks of gestation.
Wow. Okay. The ultimate analogy for bringing something new into existence.
A birth. Exactly. It's inherently a period of, well, often intense testing, isn't it? It can be uncomfortable, sometimes painful. You have signs like contractions, maybe prophetic birth pangs. And it all culminates in a new beginning. A complete transformation, resurrection into a new life, literally going from one state to a completely new one.
In that analogy, the pregnancy one, it handles that big critique you always hear, doesn't it? No man knows the day or the hour.
It really does. Think about it. A mother expecting a child, she knows the signs. She knows the season. She knows she's due around that 40-week mark.
Right.
But does she know the precise day or the exact hour the birth will actually happen? No, never. The date is approximate, maybe a window, but the season, the general time frame, is certain.
That's a really powerful way to look at the prophetic timeline. We know the season signaled by trumpets, perhaps, and maybe 40, gives us the maximum gestation period, the due date window.
That's the idea, but the exact micro moment, that's still reserved. Divine timing.
We can go even deeper, though, right, into the language itself, the Hebrew. Does it confirm this link between 40 and water and, well, the womb?
Oh, absolutely. The connection is quite profound. The Hebrew letter that actually represents the number 40 is mem, like the letter M.
Mem.
Now, mem is the first letter of the Hebrew word mayim, and mayim means water.
Water. Okay, so 40 connects directly to water.
Directly. And visually. The shape of the letter mem itself is often seen as resembling a womb, the source of life, the place where that transformation, spiritual and physical, happens.
That's fascinating. And I remember reading in the source material about the letter mem having 2 different forms, and that hides another clue.
Yes, exactly. There's what's called the open mem, That's the form usually used within a word. It kind of symbolizes an open womb, the natural birth process.
Okay.
Then there's the closed mem, sometimes called the final mem. It's usually only used at the very end of a Hebrew word. It signifies completion, finality, but also a closed space.
Right. But the sources pointed out this really weird instance. A place where that closed mem, the final one, shows up smack in the middle of a word, not at the end.
Yes, it's a critical, almost cryptic clue. You find it in Isaiah chapter 9, verse 7. It's right in that famous prophecy about the Messiah. For unto us a child is born. The word is lamarba. It means something like to the increase or of the government. But the way it's spelled in the ancient scrolls uses a closed mem right in the middle of the word. It completely breaks standard Hebrew grammar.
It's like a typo, but preserved.
Exactly. A grammatical anomaly, or so it seems. But the scribes knew it was significant. They meticulously preserved this strange spelling for thousands of years.
Just pause on that. They protected what looked like a mistake because they knew it held a deeper meaning.
Precisely. So if mem symbolizes the womb, right, and this word lamarba is describing the birth of the Messiah, what does a closed mem, a closed womb in the middle of that word signify?
The virgin conception. Mary. A supernatural birth from a closed womb.
That's the interpretation. It's encoded right there, linguistically tied to the number 40's letter. The miracle is hidden in the spelling.
And this ties straight back to the whole idea of being born again, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And the rapture potentially being the physical completion of that.
Yes, that transformation from our current carnal bodies to glorified ones, that's the ultimate physical fulfillment of being born again. And 40 is central even to the rituals that symbolize this.
Like the mikvah.
Like the mikvah, exactly. The ritual bath used for purification, for conversion in Judaism. For a mikvah to be considered valid, kosher, it has to contain a minimum of 40 Cs of water. That's a specific measured volume.
40 measures. Why 40?
Enough water to fully submerge an adult. It has to be living water connected to a natural source. And that volume, 40 Cs, it's understood to symbolize the waters of the womb.
So immersion in the mikvah is like returning to the womb to be reborn?
It simulates it, yes.
Yeah.
For a new birth, purification, baptism, immersion. It's a reenactment of that birthing process. You go down into the water, the womb, the mem, the 40, you're cleansed, covered by the word, and you come up resurrected. Born anew. The whole concept is wrapped up in the number 40.
That is really powerful confirmation that 40 isn't just arbitrary. It seems to be this universal scriptural symbol for a completed cycle of purification leading to transformation.
It appears that way.
But okay, to really land the argument that 40 represents the maximum waiting time before deliverance, we need to see how consistently it's used across Scripture, right, in different contexts.
Absolutely. We need to synthesize its usage. And when you look, you see 40 popping up universally as this period of testing or judgment that comes right before a major shift or a new beginning.
Okay, like what? The most obvious one has to be Noah, right?
Noah's flood, definitely. 40 days and 40 nights of continuous rain. Destruction, yes, but leading directly to the cleansing and renewal of the entire earth.
What about when faith fails? Does 40 determine the length of, say, punishment?
It certainly seems to. Look at the spies sent into Canaan, the promised land.
Right.
They scouted the land for 40 days. When 10 of them came back with that bad report rooted in fear and unbelief, what was the punishment?
40 years of wandering in the wilderness.
Exactly. 1 year for each day of unbelief during that 40-day scouting mission. The punishment's length was directly mathematically tied to the number 40.
And how does this connect back to the current situation? The source material mentioned the mockery, the scoffers.
Right. The sources draw a really interesting parallel there to Goliath.
Goliath, okay.
Remember him, the giant champion of the Philistines. The text says he came out and mocked, taunted, challenged Israel for 40 days, morning and evening for 40 straight days.
40 days of mockery, until David showed up.
Until David, the type of the Messiah, showed up with the stone and struck him down. The period of intense testing and public mockery lasted exactly 40 days before the deliverance arrived.
So the argument being presented is that this current season of discouragement, the scoffing that the watchmen are facing, which really ramped up right after Tishri, that it can't, based on this pattern, go beyond the 40-day testing period before the deliverer of the stone arrives.
That's the interpretation the sources are strongly suggesting, yes. It's presented as a structured period. Divine patience, but with a limit. We also see it with Nineveh, remember? God gave them 40 days.
40 days to repent before judgment fell. Grace, but time limited.
Exactly.
And beyond judgment and testing, 40 also seems to define major periods of leadership and transformation.
Oh, absolutely. Think about the great founding kings of Israel. Saul, David, Solomon. How long did each of them reign?
40 years each, a complete tested period of rule.
Right. And Moses, his entire life, the ultimate picture of a delivered leader bringing others out. It's perfectly structured in 3 40-year segments.
40 years in Egypt, 40 years as a shepherd in Midian.
And then 40 years leading the Exodus. 40 represents a full, finished, tested cycle. Preparation complete.
And maybe most critically for the timing argument, Jesus himself.
Yeah.
After the resurrection.
Yes. He appeared to his disciples, proved he was alive over a period of 40 days.
40 days before he ascended. That marks the transition, right? From the physical resurrected body to the glorified ascended state. A shift to a new dimensional existence.
It's the ultimate period of transition and showing the completion of his earthly work before the next phase began. But perhaps the strongest argument, the one that the sources really lean on to say 40, is the maximum allowed waiting time. It comes from the law itself.
Okay, where in the law?
Deuteronomy 25, verse 3. It deals with punishment, specifically lashings.
The maximum number of stripes.
Yes. The law explicitly states that the maximum number of blows allowed is 40. 40 stripes he may give him and not exceed. 40 is the absolute limit.
Okay, I see the number 40 there, clearly stated as a maximum for punishment. But how do we jump from physical lashings to a spiritual waiting period for the rapture? Why would that specific rule apply here? Couldn't the testing just reset or go longer if needed?
That's a really crucial question, and the interpretation hinges on the idea of divine consistency, God's character. The thinking is this: that waiting period, the anxiety, the spiritual battle against doubt, the endurance of mockery, that is a form of spiritual chastisement or testing. It's like a wilderness trial for the watcher's faith, like a spiritual refining process. Exactly. So if God himself set a maximum limit, 40, for physical chastisement under his own law, would he then allow the spiritual chastisement, the testing of faith for his faithful watchers, to exceed that same boundary? The argument is no. The expectation is that the divine relief, the deliverance, the rescue wouldn't scripturally be postponed beyond that 40-day window. To go longer would, in a sense, violate the pattern of maximum permissible testing he himself established.
So the 40-day limit acts almost like a covenantal failsafe for the faithful enduring the test.
Yeah.
They know it can't go beyond that point based on God's own stated limits.
That's the essence of the argument presented in the sources, yeah.
Okay. That really strengthens the case for 40 being a hard boundary. Which takes us neatly into Section 4, the Exodus Blueprint. We need to connect this specific 40-day waiting timeline to the actual physical journey Israel took out of Egypt. Show that this pattern isn't new.
Right. Because the Exodus isn't just ancient history. It's consistently presented as the definitive roadmap for the whole salvation and redemption process. And it's important to remember, God's immediate goal for Israel leaving Egypt wasn't the Promised Land, not straight away.
Where were they headed first?
Mount Sinai. That was the intended first destination, the place where he would meet them, establish the covenant with them, give them the law, essentially establish the ketubah, the marriage contract, with his chosen people.
The Exodus journey as a picture of the salvation process leading to covenant. And even the name for Egypt holds a clue, doesn't it, about the bondage?
It does, yeah. The Hebrew word for Egypt is Mitzrayim. It literally means something like straits or double straits, often interpreted as being surrounded by water or tightly constricted. Bondage.
Okay.
Now, here's a fascinating wordplay the sources highlight. If you take the Hebrew letter sad or sadeh, which often represents righteousness, the tzaddik or righteous one, if you remove that letter from the word Mitzrayim,
what are you left with?
the remaining letters spell Miriam.
Moses' sister.
Moses' sister, who was Miriam. She was the one who led the women in singing the song of salvation and deliverance right after they crossed the Red Sea, after the righteous remnant was extracted from the waters of bondage.
So Mitzrayim, bondage, minus Sahad, righteousness, equals Miriam, the song of salvation after deliverance. Wow. The removal of the righteous is the story.
It's an extraction narrative baked into the language. And that extraction, that exodus, it had a specific timetable. Just like the watchmen are potentially tracking 40 days from Tishri, there's a clear scriptural precedent for this exact timing related to purity and presentation.
Oh, this must be the Simeon and Anna connection you mentioned earlier, tied to the Levitical law.
Exactly that. Leviticus chapter 12 lays out the law. After a woman gives birth to a male child, she undergoes a period of purification lasting 40 days.
40 days.
40 days. And then on the 40th day, she was to present the child at the temple. Now, think about Simeon and Anna in Luke's gospel.
They were devout, waiting in the temple for the Messiah, for the consolation of Israel.
Yes. And when did they show up? When were they led by the Spirit into the temple courts to finally see the infant Jesus?
It must have been on the 40th day after his birth, following the purification law.
Precisely on the 40th day, according to the timing required by the written word in Leviticus. They were guided supernaturally, yes, but guided according to the written prophetic instructions to be there for the revealing of the Son on that specific mandated 40th day.
That is incredibly powerful validation for the 40th day landing around November 1st or 2nd in our current context, being a divinely appointed time for a highly anticipated revealing or delivery.
It connects the natural law Leviticus with the supernatural fulfillment, witnessing the Messiah, all converging on the number 40. Now, let's tie this back directly to the Exodus journey itself. We established earlier that the Israelites arrived at the base of Mount Sinai on the 47th day after leaving Egypt.
Right. The sources say the first day of the third month, Sidan, which calculates out to 47 days exactly from the 15th of Nisan, the day they left Egypt.
Okay, hold that number. Day 47 for arrival at Sinai. Now, remember, the date the flood began in Noah's time.
The 17th day of the second month, which we calculated was also 47 days after the start of that year's Tishri 1, day 47.
Exactly. That 47-day mark shows up in both timelines. The arrival at the place of covenant, Sinai, and the commencement of major judgment, the flood, both occur on day 47 from their respective starting points.
That's stunning parallelism.
It strongly suggests, again, that if the major event, judgment, or covenant establishment happens on day 47, then the deliverance, the entry into safety, the ark, or maybe the pillar of cloud leading them, happens 7 days prior.
On day 40. The consistency across these two foundational narratives, Noah and Exodus, is incredible.
It is. And there's one more numeric clue from the Exodus journey, that the sources connect directly to the period after the potential Rapture, the tribulation.
Okay.
The meticulous records, particularly in Numbers 33, list every single place the Israelites stopped and camped during their entire wilderness journey before entering the land. How many stops were there?
I remember seeing this. It was 42, wasn't it? Exactly, 42 stops or campsites.
42 stops. Now, where else in prophecy does the number 42 feature prominently in relation to a time of trial in the wilderness?
Revelation 12. The woman representing Israel flees into the wilderness where she's protected for 12,260 days.
And how many months is 12,260 days?
42 months,
right.
3.5 years.
Exactly. The 42 stops of the Exodus journey are seen as a direct prophetic map, a foreshadowing of the 42 months of the Great Tribulation period specifically for Israel. The woman after the male child, often interpreted as the raptured church or overcoming remnant, is caught up to God's throne.
So the 42 stops represent the great testing that follows the deliverance, which means the escape has to happen before that 42-stage journey really begins.
It acts as the dividing line. The escape precedes the wilderness trial for those left, which then begs the question, if the entry, the deliverance, happens precisely on day 40, does Scripture give us any clues about the nature of that 40th day? What was happening? What was the action associated with that moment in the Exodus journey?
Can we actually pinpoint the campsite Israel was at on day 40?
We can get very close using the list in Numbers 33. If they arrived at Sinai on day 47, we just need to backtrack 7 days on their campsite itinerary.
Okay. What camps fall in that window around day 40?
The sequence right around that crucial time frame includes 2 campsites listed consecutively. A place called Dophkah, followed immediately by Alush.
Dophkah and Alush. Okay. Do those names mean anything significant?
Oh, this is where it gets really exciting, linguistically. The name of that first campsite, Dophkah. You won't believe this. In Hebrew, Dophkah means knocking.
Knocking.
Knocking, beating, striking. Like knocking on a door.
Wait a minute. Knocking? Are you serious? That's knocking on heaven's door right there.
Yeah.
The parable of the 10 virgins, Matthew 25.
It's an incredibly direct, almost startling connection, isn't it? The sources jump right on this. Remember, the Church of Philadelphia in Revelation, they are the ones promised an open door.
An open door.
This Dophkah moment, day 40, is potentially the time of entry through that open door. Meanwhile, who's left knocking later in the parable after the door is shut?
The foolish virgins, they arrive too late.
Exactly. So the 40th day, the proposed maximum waiting time endpoint, is scripturally associated with a campsite whose name literally means knocking, the moment of seeking entry.
That is, wow. That's not subtle. That feels like Exactly what the watchmen have been doing, spiritually knocking, waiting for that door. Okay, but what about the very next stop, the one immediately following Dophkah?
Alush.
Alush. This name means to knead, specifically like kneading dough to make bread.
Kneading bread. How does that fit?
Well, think about what bread often symbolizes throughout Scripture.
The body of Christ. The bread of life. Yes. And by extension, the bride of Christ, the church, is often seen in that context, the preparation of the bread. So the name Alush following Dophkah could signify that the bread is ready. The bride, the church, having gone through the waiting and testing, is now prepared, kneaded, ready for consumption, for completion, for divine rest before the next phase.
The waiting time has purified the watchers, maybe, transformed them into the prepared bride, the ready bread.
That's the picture being painted. The watchers become the ready bread at Alush right after the knocking entry at Dophkah on day 40.
So the 40th day checkpoint, the moment of potential deliverance, is linguistically bookended by knocking for entry and the readiness of the bread. That's not coincidence. That feels incredibly deliberate, encoded.
Divine breadcrumbs, perhaps. It seems to confirm that the delay isn't a sign of failure or miscalculation, but rather a structured, purposeful process. God uses that time, maybe, to ensure the bride is purified, the oil is maintained, the testing is complete right up to that maximum 40-day limit. He himself seems to have prescribed in his law and demonstrated in the Exodus.
Let's tackle the elephant in the room one last time, just to be thorough before we wrap up. It's that counter-argument we touched on. But no man knows the day or the hour.
Right.
You mentioned the pregnancy analogy earlier, which helps. But the sources we've been discussing rely pretty heavily on calendar math. Specific day counts 40 days, 47 days. How do we really reconcile the apparent precision of this 40-day limit with that statement from Jesus?
It's a crucial point. And the reconciliation comes down to understanding the difference between knowing the general season or the window versus knowing the precise moment. The Feast of Trumpets, for instance, is often called the feast where no man knows the day or hour because it depends on the physical sighting of the new moon to start the year. It signals the start of the season.
Okay.
The number 40 in this interpretation doesn't necessarily pinpoint the exact microsecond of the event. Instead, it defines the maximum duration of the waiting season, the boundary of the due date window. We aren't setting the exact hour or minute. The sources argue we're identifying the latest scriptural limit for the waiting and testing period to conclude.
Like Simeon and Anna knew the 40th day was the deadline for the purification requirement, even if they didn't know the exact moment Mary and Joseph would walk in.
Exactly. They knew the boundary conditions set by the word. The watchmen, according to this view, can know the 40-day boundary for their testing. The ultimate fulfillment could potentially happen any time within that 40-day window, perhaps even earlier, but the pressure builds, and the expectation culminates as that maximum scriptural boundary approaches. The limit itself is knowable from the patterns.
Okay. So, pulling all these threads together, it seems the number 40 isn't just incidental, it's revealed as this core organizing principle, specifically for this prophetic waiting period following trumpets.
It really seems to be foundational, according to this analysis. It's the biblical period of tested waiting, yes, but it always points towards birth, transformation, resurrection. And this whole waiting period that, people are experiencing, it's potentially a designed purification process, perfectly aligning the timelines we see in Noah's Ark entry, the Exodus journey toward Sinai, and even that 40-day purification law that Simeon and Anna were watching.
So the ultimate takeaway from the sources is that the Ark door, that Dophkah moment, the deliverance, it's strongly anticipated around November 1st or 2nd, which is the 40th day. And that happens just before the larger judgment might begin 7 days later, around day 47.
Correct. And it's crucial to grasp what this event is. It's presented as the literal, physical completion of our salvation. We are spiritually born again the moment we accept Christ, yes. But the rapture, the catching away, is framed as the redemption of the body, the final fulfillment of that promise. It's the ultimate exiting of the dark, watery womb of this carnal world, Mitzrayim, and being birthed into a new, incorruptible, dimensional existence.
Okay. So given all this, what does this deep dive, this analysis demand of you, the listener, right now, especially if you're one of those feeling that fatigue we started with?
Well, I think it demands perseverance. Yeah. Above all else, think about the radical nature, the sheer consequence of the event being discussed. Literal, physical, eternal transformation.
Yeah.
Given those stakes, the risk of giving up now, of running out of oil like the foolish virgins, of letting discouragement win, maybe even joining the mockers and scoffers, That risk seems far, far greater than the risk of continuing to watch, even if the precise timing isn't exactly as calculated.
Being wrong about the date is less consequential than being unprepared for the event.
Infinitely less consequential. And that commitment, that choice to keep watching, keep trimming the lamps, right up until the very last possible moment, maybe even until that 40th day boundary. The sources suggest that perseverance is what defines the faithful remnant, the character of the Church of Philadelphia.
The test is designed specifically to see who keeps the faith when the wait feels better, who keeps their oil ready when the night feels long. And the Word, through these patterns, seems to tell us. The longest that specific test can last is 40 days.
Exactly. And maybe here's a final provocative thought for you, for the listener, to kind of chew on. It builds directly on those Hebrew roots we explored.
Oh,
If 40 is the number tied to gestation, to the womb, and the rapture is presented as the literal birth of the male child from the womb of this world, consider the Hebrew word for mercy. It's reshem.
Reshem, mercy.
That word, reshem, is derived directly from the Hebrew word for womb.
Wow. Mercy comes from womb.
The connection is intrinsic in the language. So when we, the faithful, plead with God for mercy during this final, perhaps bitter waiting period, aren't we, linguistically and maybe prophetically, pleading with him to remember his resum, to remember his womb-like, nurturing, birthing capacity, and to act on it, to deliver us, to birth us now?
Remember your Reshem, remember your womb, your mercy, and deliver. That's a powerful thought to hold on to, especially now. Thank you. This has been incredibly insightful.
Glad we could dive into it.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. Keep watching, keep praying. We'll talk to you next time.